and welcome to another episode. Wow, that sounded so... Hello. Welcome to another episode of The Summer of Me. I feel like we are just rolling through these episodes. I actually don't have any clue what number of episode we are on as of today, but I feel like we're in the double digits, which is exciting. And I am really enjoying this process of kind of sharing my own story, my own life with you guys, but also diving into other people's stories and their experiences. And some of these episodes are going to get a little random. Some of them are going to still, talk about divorce and all the really hard things that I've gone through. And some of them are going to just blow you out of your seats. Today, we are talking about 5 lessons that have impacted my life or changed my life. And this is like, that feels like, I feel like that's kind of a intense thing to say. These are basically thoughts that live in my head rent free that I literally, it doesn't matter like what I'm doing. It'll be like, da-da-da-da-da, like, remember this, you saw this. And they're either podcasts or things my therapist has said or a random post on Pinterest. You guys know it's my weak moment. And they are just things that I repeat to myself all the time and I find myself coming back to. And at this point, I can probably very thoroughly say like they've impacted my life in some capacity because they've changed the way that I behave and the way that I think. So we're just going to go through them and I'm going to share about them with you. And hopefully you can write them down and apply them to your life in some capacity. And again, I just think that like sometimes we see things and it's like really sits with us and like it's impossible to forget. And that's what these 5 things are to me. So if you listen to podcasts or kind of are in like the space of like self-improvement or growth, you probably know who Mel Robbins is. She has books and podcasts and probably a million other things that I don't even know about. And I'm not like a super avid podcast listener, honestly. Mostly because I just don't have a ton of time alone where I like have the capacity to listen to something. I usually have like 5 kids asking for Chick-fil-A and God knows what else in my car. But this specific podcast, I actually saw the snippet on like an Instagram reel and I went and watched the podcast, and she talks about this theory called the let them theory or the let them rule, whatever it is. And I really encourage you guys to listen to this. I believe the episode on her podcast is called Let Them. So I saw this clip and I was like, I have to go listen to this entire episode because it really I was like, holy shit, I am a control freak. Holy shit, I don't let people do anything. And the episode's called Let Them. And it is basically this idea or this theory of if people are going to do something, let them. And she talks about how her kids were going to prom. I believe I might butcher the story a little bit. But anyways, her kids were going to prom and they wanted to go to like, again, don't quote me on this, but they wanted to go to somewhere like a Chipotle or something like that. Like something not fancy, something kind of just like, what are you doing? And she's like, I started like arguing with my teenagers, like, why would you do that? This is such a bad idea, blah, 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 blah. And like, you need to go somewhere fancy, and projecting her own like ideals on her kids and like saying like, no, you should do this. When in reality, she's like, it doesn't actually like impact me at all. It doesn't impact my life. It doesn't change what I'm doing. And like, at the end of the day, I'm just being a fucking controlling person. Like I'm just being controlling because I have like this idea of how I want this to go. And if I were doing this my way, like this is how it would go. But like, and so she goes, and I don't remember if her daughter said it to her or something, but like, she goes, I got to the place where I was like, let them choose, like, let them be that, let them act that way. And she goes on to talk about like how you can apply this in so many different areas of your life. And for me, I have this beautiful habit of control. And it is something that it is like a tough pill to swallow. And it's something that I have learned about myself. And again, like I say this all the time, but awareness is one of those things that is truly sometimes enough to change a habit or a lifelong curse of being controlling or whatever you fill in the blank. And I have found myself applying this to so many different things, whether it is like when we're co-parenting and the other parent is maybe doing something where you're like, I really don't want them to be going to McDonald's, or I really don't want them to be doing this or watching this or whatever. Like there's obviously a fine line there between like, hey, our kids don't watch YouTube because there's creeps on there. But like, I think that there's a really like there's a lesson to be had, and like, let them. It's not going to ruin your life. It's not going to impact this part negatively. Like, we spend so much time trying to control what everybody else around us is doing instead of just letting them act that way and like behave that way. And oftentimes, especially like, and if you're in a dating relationship or a friendship and you're like, I wish this person would call, I wish this person would do this, let them, because what they're doing is they're showing you who they are and who they want to be and how they're going to behave. And the more that you try to control, you're going to shape that person or try to shape that person into who you think that they should be or you want them to be. And then when they, when you lock them in, let's say you're dating, when you lock that person in and you're like, okay, we're in a relationship, and then they behave how they truly are, then they behave how like they truly are going to behave because it's who they are innately, you're going to be pissed and you're going to be like, why aren't you this person? And they're like, well, I showed you this, but you didn't let me be that person. And so it's just like you're weaving this web of control. I think when you can like realize that you're trying to control a situation and you repeat to yourself in your head, let them behave this way. Let them go there. Let them do this. Let them. And like, they're going to face the repercussions of that, whether that means losing you, if it's your kids, whether that means having a consequence. But like, the more you let people do them and you focus on you and what you can control in that situation, which is your behavior and your feelings with that, it is like the most freeing phrase. I tell this to my mom sometimes because she'll stress out about somebody or something. And it's like a dynamic that she fucking has no business dealing with. And my mom knows this. Like, we all do this. We all meddle in things that it's like, well, that person should have done this. Let them. Why do you care so much? You care because it's like, let them. Like, why do you care so much? And that's what you need to ask yourself is like, why am I trying to control this situation? So if I were to like tattoo more words on my body, I already look like a newspaper, so I probably won't do that. But like, let them would be one of those things where I'd be like, let them, like, let them. Repeat it to yourself 100 times. And it is truly so freeing in so many situations. And you find out either situations unwrinkle themselves, they work themselves out, or they show their real true colors, especially in relationships. And then you're like, wow, I really dodged that bullet because I let that person be who they actually are and not who I'm trying to force them to be. So that's number one. Number two, I can vividly remember where I heard this. I was driving on a freeway in Seattle. I was actually driving to a HomeGoods and I was listening to this podcast. I believe it was Oprah with Brene Brown. I think I talked about this actually with my friend Emily, but this concept of foreboding joy by dress rehearsing tragedy. If you struggle with anxiety of any type, which I think we all probably do to some capacity, the idea of like, I can't be like too excited or fulfilled or happy or full of joy in this situation because I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I am dress rehearsing tragedy, which by dress rehearsing tragedy, AKA like anticipating something's going to happen or the worst is going to happen, or, let's put it to a few situations. If you're dating and you're like, well, that person's probably going to cheat on me, or they're probably going to leave because you've experienced that in the past, or they're going to just like not be that interested in me. You're not able to experience the full capacity and joy of that relationship because you're always anticipating what is going to happen next. I found myself doing this constantly, especially when I had babies. I was like, I am nursing this baby and I'm soaking this up, but like, holy shit, something's going to happen. Like, there's just no way it can be this good for that long. Like, they're going to get sick, or I would get so anxious about my kids getting sick that I wouldn't even be able to enjoy like the present because I'd be like doing 10 million things to try to prevent them from getting sick. When in reality, like, they were totally healthy, and it was my own anxiety, like overtaking that joy and dress rehearsing that tragedy of like, well, this is going to happen and they're going to get RSV and then they're going to die. Like, no, they're not. Like, yes, we see those situations. And one of the things, this is like a total sidebar, but I heard a sermon at one point and it was talking about how we basically are not created to absorb the stories of everybody else in the world, which is what we have access to on social media, right? You see a random person halfway across the country that you have no relation to, and all of a sudden you start like diving into like their spouse having cancer or their kid being really sick with something, and then like you're fully invested in that story and you don't know these people, you have no connection to them, you simply have been like absorbed by their story, which I understand, like we have a capacity to be like empathetic and like whatever, but like that impacts us because it starts to infiltrate different parts of our life, and we are not created, God did not create us to absorb the world's like tragedy and sadness and everybody's individual stories of all these things. And it's damn near impossible not to start to apply that to our lives and be like, well, I have this baby, but like, I know that, now that I followed this person and saw this story, like I know that they could fall out of a golf cart and like something so severe could happen to them. And like, now I can't even exist on like with my kids on a golf course because I would be so terrified. Or I can't, you can apply this to so many different things. And I think it's a balance of like being aware of your community and like being entrenched in like what's going on in your life and in your families and the people that are in your circle. We've talked about like the inner circle, the circle of intimacy, all of these things. But beyond that, like we have to be really, really careful about how much we're absorbing from other people's lives, because it goes back to this lesson of like, we start to forebode the joy in our own life because we are dress rehearsing the tragedy that we've seen in other people's lives. And it has a deep ability to cripple the joy in your life, which obviously we don't want. We want to experience our life and be present and like experience the joy of our life to the fullest. And yeah, there's going to be bad things that are going to happen. And there is going to be the times where the other shoe does drop, but like that's going to happen when that's going to happen, regardless of you stressing out about it. Easier said than done, but a lesson for me that was like very impactful. So, another podcast that I highly suggest you listen to is this one. It's Oprah and Brene Brown. We'll put them in the show notes, but these are 2 podcast episodes that really were like, wow, okay, I will take this with me forever. This one comes straight from my therapist. I actually don't remember which therapist. I have had a couple. Just blow through them like the wind, baby. But this was in the middle of the very thick of my divorce. And I was debilitated by like the amount of decisions that I had to make, the thought of having to move my kids, the thought of having to like fund my own life financially, how to get a job, how to like pay for divorce lawyers. Like every decision in my divorce was absolutely excruciating. And I used to be like, I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know what's going to happen. And she used to tell me all the time, like, there is so much power and I don't know. You don't have to know what's next. You don't have to know what's tomorrow. You have to know one thing, and that is like where you are going to be in the next minute of your day. Like what is going to happen in the next minute of your day. And that is it. And I think we obsess over the future. This is a question I get in like my Instagram Q&As all the time. I do a Q&A every week and people are like, how do you not like stress out about like if you're going to find somebody after your divorce, or if I'm going to be alone forever, or where you're going to move when you move across the country, where you're going to live. Just like constantly people are asking like, how do you not stress out about the future? And it's like, well, number one, like, I don't know, because I clearly have and do still from time to time. But I think like the more we can get comfortable not knowing and just living in the moment and being like, I am going to be comfortable and present like right here, and reminding yourself like there's power in I don't know, because it leaves the field open. Like if you try to obsess and like, okay, we're going to do this and then we're going to go here and we're going to be this place and I'm going to move into this house. Like you kind of pigeonhole yourself into a situation where you don't know. Like for me, I was like, I am going to stay in my house. There is no way, like I am not leaving this house. I am like, I can afford it. I'm going to hustle my ass. Like I was dead set on keeping this big, huge house that we had bought that I definitely like probably could have figured out a way to afford, but also would have been like, living Dorito to Dorito, which doesn't sound that bad, honestly. Holy side note, Doritos being gluten-free has been the best discovery of my week so far, and it's only Monday. Anyways, I was like really, really dead set on this, and I was not willing to take like, I don't know what's next. I don't know where we're going to live as an answer. Like, and my therapist, this is where we started talking about this. She's like, there's power in I don't know. Like, you don't know what's coming for you. So like, just be okay with being like, I don't know what's next, but we're going to find out. And I remember we were doing like mediation with our divorce and sitting in this like 16th floor boardroom where you like have a mediator and they go back and forth and they're like, okay, what do you want out of this? And then what do you want? And like, you basically have somebody that goes back and forth between 2 different rooms and negotiates for you. And it came down to, through a series of events, basically like there's not a situation or a happening in which you're going to be able to keep the house, is what she had told me. And I remember in that moment, I told my lawyer, I was like, and I was severely depressed at this time, but I remember telling my lawyer, I was like, if this window opened out of this building, I would jump out right now. Like this is the biggest loss of my life. And the loss was like this house, because for my kids, it was like, it signified stability and like me being able to give them like one thing that like didn't change. And I look back on that, and had I just been like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep the house, because that moment, rewind really quickly, that moment like wrecked me. Like it really was my rock bottom. And what happened is like I came out of that being like, all right, like I've lost everything now. I remember saying this to myself. I remember getting in my car. I remember specifically like listening to a certain album. And I remember saying to myself like, all right, I've lost everything. I have lost my entire life. I have lost, aside from my kids, essentially. But I had also like felt like I lost half of my time with them, right? With custody and whatnot. But I was like, I've lost everything. And my house was kind of the last thing to go. And I look back and I'm like, if I had just had the strength, which again, this is so much easier said than done, but like the strength and the wherewithal to be like, it's okay. Like, I don't know what's next. Like, I don't know where we're going to live. Like if it works out with this house, great. If it doesn't, like, okay too. Like, I don't know. And I'm okay with that. And instead I was gripping so tightly. And so losing that felt like, I mean, it was horrific. Like I remember just being so physically like and emotionally just devastated. And all of that to say, I think the more we can let go, again, let them, right? Like they all kind of roll into each other, but like the more we can let go and just be like, I don't know where I'm going to live next. And I think that that's a huge one, like with divorce. It's like, you know, everybody wants to keep their house. And what I learned from that too, in that process was like, what I didn't know was like losing that house was going to give me the most peace that I had ever experienced, because I got to have my own house and build a new life. And like that house was where I like found myself again and discovered just like this true peace where it was like, this house is attached to nothing but my happiness. So anyways, repeat that to yourself. That's another tattoo you can get. Power and I don't know. How about it? We'll just develop a whole flash sheet of tattoos for you guys. You can look like newspapers too. The opposite of love is indifference. This one has like really helped me in my healing process. It's a lyric of something, but I will be honest that it was not a lyric when I like first heard this quote, because I heard it in a song like not that long ago. And I was like, wait, what? These people know this too? The opposite of love is indifference. This was really like a powerful learning moment for me. I think we like, you know, especially in a divorce, like the natural inclination is like, I hate that person, or I like, they're dead to me kind of thing. And it wasn't until I got to a place in my divorce and after my divorce of indifference where it was like, I actually like, I'm so neutral about the entire situation. I don't have heated feelings one way or the other. I am like actually so indifferent. I'm indifferent where you go. I'm indifferent what you do. I'm indifferent who you date, who you're with, where you have been. I'm indifferent about our past. I'm indifferent about literally all of it. And I look like I have this with ex-boyfriends, and I think with a marriage, it's like a much harder place to get to. But the minute I felt that, and I remember thinking like, oh, actually, like I would be like super pumped if like he dated somebody. Like I would feel so indifferent about it. Like it would be like, great, happy for you. Indifference is truly one of the most, neutrality and indifference, like same thing, are one of the most like empowered and strong emotions I think that you can feel, because it goes to show like how much you've grown, how much you've come out of that situation, how much you've moved on, and how much like people are always like, oh, I hate this person. I hate this person. It's like, no, you haven't healed from that person. And there's people in my life that I don't have indifference with. I like actually am like, you can go sit on a sword. And I truly, like on one hand, I can count them, but I have not fully healed. And that gives me a great target for therapy or whatever, like I'm working on, like to be able to like try to heal from those relationships so I can feel indifferent about those people. So I think if you're healing from a relationship, whether it's a family relationship or a marriage or whatever, the ultimate goal at the end of the day is that you are indifferent. You are indifferent about that person's behavior. You're indifferent about that relationship. You're indifferent about how you interact with that person. And the goal is that like that doesn't phase you. Like it's like, oh, okay, you're no different to me than, you know, the Target lady, the Target cashier. Oh my God, it's my favorite SNL skit of all time. All right. And then the last one, you guys, this is a good one. This one, I don't remember where I heard this. It was maybe in therapy. Maybe it was an Pinstagram quote. This one is so good. Are you ready? Are you holding on to your seats? I feel like you need to write this down. The people who dislike your boundaries are the ones who benefit from you not having them. Can you even? The people who dislike your boundaries are the ones who benefit from you not having them. anytime I get into like a situation where I'm like, this person's pushing my boundaries, this person is like, feels like is making me feel uncomfortable for setting this boundary. I start to like analyze that relationship and be like, oh, it's because they benefit when I don't stand up for myself. It's because they benefit when I do show up here, even though I don't want to. It's their benefit. And most of the time, like if you are in a respectful relationship, again, dating, romance, friendship, family, whatever, if you set a boundary with somebody and it's a mutually like respectful relationship, they're going to be like, okay, heard, period. If you are in a relationship or a friendship dynamic with somebody who gets pissed when you say no, or when you don't you say you're not going to show up to something because you don't want to be there, or you feel like you can't set a boundary with, you can't say like your truth because you're afraid of how they're going to react, they are likely taking advantage of you not having that boundary. And so it's a really easy like way to decipher like what's a healthy relationship or what's a healthy situation in a relationship and what's not. And for me, it's been a guiding force in the ability to set a boundary with somebody. Even if you're like in a great relationship with somebody, but you're like, hey, I'm not gonna drink tonight. Let's just put it this way. I'm not gonna drink tonight because I'm trying to do this health kick and like I'm really trying to like stay on track. And they are like, what the hell? You're no fun. Like this sucks. Like this is like you're lame or whatever. Like they're not respecting your boundary that you very clearly set. And it's likely because they want to have fun selfishly and like at your, like whether it's at your expense for your health kick or not. Like this is kind of a weird example, but the idea here is like, if you feel like the pushback, I think that it's a really important, like take note of that moment and look back and be like, is this person in this relationship to benefit me and to benefit them, or just to benefit them? So this specific quote is something that like I repeat to myself all the time. And I think it's important to constantly be taking inventory of relationships, the good relationships, the bad relationships, the like unstable relationships in your life, and to be aware of like, what boundaries do I need to set? What boundaries do I want to set? Or am I not setting these boundaries because I'm uncomfortable? I mean, this was something that constantly came up, like when in my marriage, it was like, well, I'm not setting this boundary because I don't want this person to leave, or I'm not setting this boundary because I don't want this person to think I'm, being unfair or whatever. But like the reality is I should have set a lot of those boundaries and I didn't, and it didn't end well. But I employ this in my current relationship where it's like, if I don't set this boundary and say like how I'm feeling and say what needs to happen, I'm not only going to regret it, but I'm going to likely not get the result that I want out of that situation. And so I'm really focused on those boundaries, and like it's a very mutual conversation that's constant, like that we constantly have, and that's important to communicate. I think, we've talked about this before, but like if you're not communicating these things and saying like, hey, I made this clear and I said this, and like you're still not doing this, and calling people out if they're not respecting your boundaries or they're not reciprocating in those situations, it's going to be really, really, really hard. So anyways, again, I will repeat this because I think it's so good. The people who dislike your boundaries are the ones who benefit from you not having them. Take an inventory of the relationships in your life. Think about the situations in your relationship where this might come into play, and talk through those, communicate through it. Because if you have a good relationship with somebody, they're going to be able to hopefully receive that feedback and say like, okay, shoot, I messed up. Or maybe they're going to have that conversation with you. Maybe you're not the one respecting people's boundaries. When they're saying no, are you arguing? Are you saying like, you're stupid, this is dumb, like whatever? Or are you actually being like, yeah, okay, I hear you. Thank you for like having the balls to come up to me and say something. So anyways, those are the 5 lessons that I repeat back to myself. They live rent-free in my brain, and I feel like have impacted me greatly in so many different situations, so many different capacities, and maybe you'll be able to use them for your life too. Thanks for listening to The Summer of Me. You can listen to episodes on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube. Come hang out and follow my chaos on Instagram @Kendra for now. See you next time.